It's great to welcome back to the program today Dylan Burns. Dylan is a streamer and an aspiring war journalist, currently with an emphasis on Ukraine. He joins us from Ukraine now. So Dylan, how long have you been in Ukraine off and on now?
In total, about a year now. I came over first in late April of last year. I spent most of that year, or at least half of that year, over in Ukraine before heading back over for the holidays to spend time with family. And I've been over here again since March to film with demining crews, interview soldiers who have fought in Bakhmut, and in bed with people on the front line who have been delivering aid to civilians in need.
So one of the claims that different folks are making is that the death toll in Ukraine is not being accurately represented. I mean, there's people on the political left that have said this. Donald Trump has said this. Do you have any insight into that, I guess, just generally?
So a lot of the estimates that people go off of are the official UN estimates. And I'm going to be honest, I've only seen the UN once since I've been here on the ground. The UN are not very visible when it comes to frontline communities in the areas that are most seeing death and destruction. And the UN also does not have access to a lot of communities that have seen the worst of the violence this war has brought to Ukraine. They don't have ready and available access to locations like Mariupol or, for example, Bakhmut, and cities that have seen high amounts of civilian casualties, Mariupol especially. And the Russians have done a lot of work to cover up their tracks. People saw as they evacuated Kiev how the soldiers were trying to burn bodies in order to cover up exactly what happened and the torture and the summary executions that were going on in their quote unquote cleansing operation. That's the word they used in private communications to describe what they were doing in the Kiev Oblast, not the word I used. So I do think that the death toll is horribly underestimated. By how much, I don't know. But most estimates that I've seen that are more serious seems to have the civilian death toll much, much higher than the 8 to 10 to 15,000 that the UN is estimating at this point. We're talking more in the like hundreds of thousands, or at least over 100,000.
Okay, so that's dramatically different and dramatically more tragic. The demining,
but the estimations vary, of course.
Of course. The demining. Talk a little bit about what this is. What are these mines, and what are the origins of those mines, and what is the demining operation?
So recently I spent a month embedded with deminers in the Kharkiv Oblast and operating in liberated territory. Mostly I was with them as they tried to remove mines that were, anti-personnel mines, PMF-1s, which are butterfly mines, which the Soviets used heavily in Afghanistan, anti-tank mines. The PMF-1s are notorious in the way that they don't really look like a normal mine. They actually look kind of like a toy. And so in Afghanistan, Afghan children used to be known to pick them up thinking they were a toy before losing their entire arm, losing their leg. And they're scattered over a lot of civilian areas in this war. And they have been scattered both in Russian-occupied territory and in territory that's controlled by the Ukrainian government. And in the time that I spent with those deminers in the Kharkiv Oblast, not only did deminers in our area die, but also civilians died in our area from these mines. And it was only around one specific small city in the Kharkiv Oblast. And this is happening all over territories that were occupied by the Russians. Anywhere that is liberated has to be meticulously cleared by deminers afterwards. But the amount of explosives that we're working with, we're talking about 70 to 100 years of demining work post-war. The 70-year estimate, by the way, I was told 4 months ago if the war stopped immediately.
Wow.
So it's probably worse than current estimates. Once this is all over, it'll probably be much worse.
And are
more
these
mines are currently being laid.
Are they more in rural areas where they can be hidden, or in what sorts of places are they?
They're in all types of locations. They're in a lot of farms and farm fields.
Right.
They place a lot of anti-tank mines there because the Russians were scared that there would be a counteroffensive that could punch through those fields. There's a lot of anti-personnel mines in the forest that I've been in. again, I was filming near power lines that needed to be restored so they could bring power to local communities. And I saw Mon 50 mines, which are basically like American claymores. I saw PMF ones in densely populated communities. And as we were driving by with these deminers through these villages and doing work, on many occasions, civilians would run out to the demining crews and almost beg them to come to their homes and remove the mines that are literally in their backyard. And we're talking anti-personnel, anti-tank, many of which are booby trapped, so civilians and deminers have a much harder time removing them. And
what is the process for removing such a mine? Such a mine?
It depends on the mine. If it's an anti-personnel mine like a Mont 50, I did record much of the process and actually uploaded it on Twitter if people wanted to go check it out. Usually you have to, for example, a Mon 50, every mine's different. You have to identify where the tripwire is. You need to cut the tripwire before going to the detonator and removing the detonator. But the problem is that's supposed to be the official process. That's how you're supposed to do it. But many of these mines are booby trapped so that when you go through this official process, if you don't notice the other tripwires or the other mines that are attached to it, it can go off and kill the demining crew. When I was in the Kharkiv Oblast, we actually lost some SESU workers, emergency service workers, to anti-tank mines that were booby trapped. There was one anti-tank mine, but under it, there were 4 other anti-tank mines, creating an incredible explosion that killed some of our guys over there. What's
the radius at which these things are dangerous?
It depends on the mine. If we're talking like a butterfly mine, it's only going to be maybe 10, 15 feet. But if we're talking anti-tank mines, it's going to be much greater distance, which can injure and maim and kill a lot more people. Wow. And how many mines are put together. Right. Because again, it was 5 anti-tank mines, so that can kill a lot of people.
There are social media videos that are released, and I don't know what point people are trying to make with some of these videos, but I've just seen the videos, and the videos are of almost like idyllic coffee shop scenes in different parts of Ukraine. And I don't know if the argument that's trying to be made is lots of people are ignoring what's going on and just going about their lives, or certain parts of the country are completely safe and this is only affecting part of the country. Can you talk a little bit about whether this dichotomy does exist and whether there are parts where it is just business as usual, hipster coffee shops and flat whites?
Sure. So most of these videos originate in Kiev. I've seen a lot of them where it's like, oh, here is like a coffee shop in Kiev or a club in Kiev. Yeah. And if you would compare what it's like to be in Kiev, for example, Bakhmut, obviously the living standards are going to be much different. It's not on directly to front line. They cannot be shelled directly by Russian artillery, which was a major contributor to a lot of civilian casualties in Kharkiv. When the Russian artillery guns were in front of Kharkiv, they constantly shelled the city. In my opinion, I think it was a deliberate act of revenge due to the fact that they couldn't take the city, and they took a lot of casualties trying to take the city. And so when those artillery guns are pushed back, that does save a lot of civilian lives. But most, if not all of Ukraine is in range of Russian cruise missiles, the S-300 missiles that they kind of retrofit to be used as just like rockets to like lob them at the city. They're not terribly accurate, but the point isn't to be accurate. The point is to whittle down Ukraine's air defense. The point, and in my opinion, is to terrorize the civilian population. And even though I'm in the supposedly tranquil Kiev, in fact, I'm even in a more tranquil part of Kiev because I'm not in the city itself. I'm in the countryside. But last week, live on stream, a missile passed a few hundred feet over our home. Wow. And it was caught on stream. I had to end stream because of it. So every part of Ukraine could be hypothetically bombed by the Russians at any time. And that's why I think air defense is so important to protect civilian lives. And I can tell you, since the Patriot air defense has been here in the Kiev Oblast, it has been busy.
Can you talk about, you had a situation where a Russian drone spotted you. Can you talk about that?
Sure. During my last trip while I was here, my first frontline embed, I was going to hang out with the Zaporozhye Territorial Defense as they went to the forward operating position. That means the last position until the Russians. It was about 1 to maybe 1.5 miles from the Russians, the forward operating position we were going to. I was going there in what was the equivalent of a soccer mom van painted green that was constantly breaking down. But that's, of course, due to the fact this territorial defense, they're local defenders, and they don't have a lot of times the best equipment. As
Yep.
much as you always see like the tanks and everything in the foreign media, much of that equipment has still yet to arrive in Ukraine, and much of that equipment is being used by is being stored in their waiting to use it in the counteroffensive. And so not everybody has the best equipment, and the situation has improved since I've been with them, and I did this as well. But on the way to the front line, we were told that the position was getting shelled, so we had to get out of the van and we just kind of hanged out on the side of the road. And then I heard this like weird buzzing sound, like 30 minutes in, just kind of waiting on the side of the road, like your phone vibrates, or maybe
Right.
like a small swarm of bees. And I looked to my friend and colleague Patrick Hillsman, and I asked him, like, "What, do you hear that?" And he says, "I don't hear it." And I'm like, "Okay, whatever." Then 5 seconds later, somebody yells drone. We all have to run into the forest, hide there for like 3 to 4 minutes. Nobody knows if it's a suicide drone. Nobody knows if it has like a grenade attached to it, which is going to drop on us. Or if it's a spotter drone that's spotting for artillery.
Right.
So then the decision is made that we have to run for it. We run into the soccer mom van, get in, drive a few miles away before parking back into the forest to try to rethink a plan on where to go next. After 15 minutes, my friend Patrick Hillsman is adamant that the artillery we heard in the distance was our former position getting shelled.
Wow.
I never confirmed it, but he's adamant that that's what happened. Once we decided that, it's too dangerous to be in this area, we get into the soccer mom van again. They try to start it. It breaks down. So we're there for another 5 minutes, just hoping to get the soccer mom van, back and ready again. We jump in. It finally, gets running, and we go off to SPG-9 practice. I'm happy the soccer mom van started.
Yeah, to say the least. Dylan, have you needed medical attention? I don't mean from injuries sustained while doing this stuff, but I just mean like you've been there a year. Have you needed to avail yourself of any kind of doctors or the medical system there? And if so, what was that like?
No, I've thankfully I've never had to get medical attention. There's been a few times where we've been near somebody when they got hurt, and we had to apply first aid to them. When we were in the Donbass, specifically Kramatorsk, which is a major location the Russians have been bombing and trying to capture, we were with an elderly woman at a dog shelter. I think actually the only functioning dog shelter in the city, which has since been bombed since we were there. There was somebody who needed medical attention, but I've never needed it. The closest I've needed it is when watching like Tucker talk about it, like maybe an aspirin or something.
Okay, got it. What's the plan for how long to stay there and when to come home?
So I don't know exactly. For me, I want to keep filming until I feel like I've gotten enough. I know I want to be home for Christmas, but I'm probably going to be here again next year as well. I want to keep covering this war until all major hostilities have ceased. I think that it deserves the coverage. There is a million different stories to tell, and I want to make sure that people can't lie about the type of disgusting shit that's going on here.
Wow. Dylan Burns in Ukraine streaming. Oh, by the way, the streams, are they at 6 p.m. Eastern, but you're there? So like, are you streaming in the middle of the night Ukraine time? Is that what's going on?
I'm streaming from 1 a.m. to late streams.
And why that schedule?
But I want to concentrate on making sure that this message gets to an American audience, because as much as I do have Ukrainian viewers, and my Ukrainian audience has certainly grown since I've been covering here. Yeah. I don't need to tell Ukrainians that their country is being torn apart. Right. I don't need to tell Ukrainians or explain to them the importance of air defense. They understand it. They understand it better than anybody else in the world. Sure. If there's any audience that needs this message, it's the American public, who are constantly being lied to about either the war is not as serious as they say, or the war crimes aren't as bad as it is, or it's not really that important, or or for example, Tucker Carlson lying about the 7-to-1 numbers for every one Ukrainian. For every one Russian that dies, 7 Ukrainians in the military died. That's the audience I want to aim at, because that's the audience that is being lied to, because the Russians want to undercut American support in America for Ukraine, so they can trample across the country, loot, pillage, and conquer it.
Dylan, really appreciate the work you're doing, and stay safe, and let's talk again.
Thank you very much. You have a fantastic day.